just want to thank you all for coming tonight. We are just thrilled to be here. I've heard of Findhorn. I've been working with the course for a quarter of a century, and I've been traveling for almost that long. And so I meet a lot of people. This is probably my 33rd country. First time in Scotland. A couple of days ago I arrived. So we're very thrilled to be here. And yeah, when they did astrological charts on me, they saw these deep, spiritual, profound kind of symbols and lots of work with communities. And I have lived in a number of spiritual communities in my life, and I've worked with a number of them, and spontaneous things kind of grew up. James was talking about me creating them. I think when you're happy and you're consistently happy, that's a striking thing in this world, and then people just start moving in with you, is the way it wasn't like I had a grand scheme of trying to start these things, but I was so happy that I had people start following me around and calling me their teacher and saying that they were students, which was kind of interesting, and then moving in with you, and then if they can't fit in your house, then they buy houses around you, and you just end up, it starts off being a community. Even though none of us, myself or the 12 messengers of peace, interesting number 12, that none of us had any intention of living in a spiritual community. If you'd asked us when we were children or young adults, adolescents, about living in community, we would say, what are you on about? You know, what is that? You know, none of us planned, it just was given. And talking tonight to George and Fabian as being guided around, going to Universal Hall and going and having a meal and going and seeing the founders' pictures and the community pictures on the wall, I just thought it's just an amazing spirit-inspired collaboration for over 50 years. And for myself, most of my time was spent inward, and then I started working with groups, and then you come into a state of mind where you see the whole world as your community. You can't really draw a boundary about where community begins and ends. It's a state of mind, it's an attitude. It's a very inviting, welcoming attitude, but people are fascinated on how do you have things work. And I think with Eileen, Katie, and Peter, and the guidance that Eileen started receiving, I started hearing the voice of Jesus back in the late 1980s, and suddenly my life was very simple because he told me what to do, who to meet, where to go. It was like having a little bird on your shoulder that is very wise and just tells you everything in great detail. Not just, I love you, just go here, go there, say this, listen, keep your mouth shut, just listen, you know, all those kind of things. And so even when I would go to see Course in Miracles teachers, Jesus was giving me commentary on the teaching. So I got an inner commentary going all the time on the good points, on clarification. So it was very, very helpful. Yes, it's, for me, the dedication is into the presence of Spirit, the presence of God, and rejoicing in the glory of that. And I am often quoted as saying that the spiritual journey is 1% principle and 99% practice. And for me, we've had so many theologies and so many spiritualities and religions that we're really aiming for an experience. That's what religion is to me, it's peace of mind. It doesn't have a theological connotation. And I really, frankly, am not even affiliated with the Course in Miracles. It's just a pathway that I used to come to peace of mind. It was like a tool. And even the Course itself says this Course is a beginning and not an end. Henceforth, here are the instructions and directions of the Holy Spirit. So I'm in a state of mind now where really the whole world, the whole universe is my community in the most literal sense. And also that there is no sense of separation. And I've often said that I have gone many, many years now and I haven't had a bad day. It's just a very consistent state of mind. And then what flows from that is a perspective on the world, which you could call forgiveness, or the happy dream, or the real world. It goes by different names in the Course, True Perception. And in my devotion to that, then it seems like I draw forth witnesses and we have a community, and the more that I hear about Findhorn and the early days and the founders, and had a little tour tonight with George and Fabian, actually right past the little caravan, the original caravan and so forth. That's just how things have gone in my life. Actually, that caravan out there, I look at, it reminds me of about the same size as my hermitage in the woods in Kentucky. And I just went off with my Course in Miracles book and basically was very content to just rest in that stillness. And then what came out of that was travels to 33 countries and countless times around and around and around the world, into cultures and countries and languages that I don't even speak, but there's visits to communist China and all kinds of places where it's just basically letting the presence pour through and seeing everyone and everything as joined and connected. So tonight I hope we can have a beautiful dialogue, particularly around the topics of relationships and community, because those are very much topics that are very dear to my heart. And I've heard about Findhorn for many, many years. And it's just really, like Kirsten said, very much of an honor to be here. We have people, non-dual teachers and friends who come and visit our community, and they're just amazed at the depth and the joy and the harmony and so forth. And I think throughout history there's been attempts at utopian communities, and the goal is to have harmonious community. Whether it's just between partners or husband and wife, a community of two, or whether you have children, or whether you have 10, 15, 20, 400, whatever, a harmonious experience. And of course with communities, there's the question raises about how do you handle logistics in community. It's fascinating, I think. I've loved living in communities, different communities, and I love visiting Findhorn to just hear how things have gone over the years, how things have evolved. Because there are all those logistics. The communities that kind of got inspired around me are non-possession communities, so there's no ownership of anything. In fact, the guidelines that were given me for the community, instead of having rules, and instead of having structures, instead of taking vows, like a lot of traditional community, you take vows, like monks do and nuns. The two guidelines I was given for our communities were no people-pleasing and no private thoughts, and that's it.
Ooh.
No possessions. We come together not possessing anything, just everything is in the pot, and it's equally in the pot, shared among myself and the messengers. And we've used those two guidelines to allow the darkness to come up. Because I think everyone on this planet knows that there is, Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious darkness, and Billy Joel wrote about it, the stranger. He wrote a song where the stranger just kicked me right between the eyes. There's that part that comes up. It can be rage, it can be anger, all kinds of hurt, envy, jealousies, all those emotions, those are going to come up. And so my devotion was working with the Course and going through hermitage experiences, dark nights of the soul, going through a huge purge of ego, which we have to go from the darkness to the light. We can't leave anything hidden. And that's why these two guidelines, no people-pleasing and no private thoughts, are so important. And people do go through the darkness. When it happens in your family, when the darkness arises, or in your community, it shakes the whole community. And so I think I've been used by the Holy Spirit as kind of a very, very super strong presence of safety, of security, of allowance, to allow everyone who comes in my contact, whether it's in gatherings like this or in community, to be able to have the permission and allowance to let the shadow up. And when we say no people pleasing, we're saying don't just go through the motions and act based on approval or what you think other people think you should do or how you should be. Don't try to fake it. I'm not a big proponent of fake it till you make it. I am not at all. I say, let's have some integrity. Let's have honesty. And the only way we can reach true honesty is to have consistent guidance. We have to be in consistent attunement, consistent harmony. And everybody's got a voice. And most of the time in spiritual communities throughout the centuries, another thing that comes up, aside from possessions and rules and regulations and what are the consequences for breaking the rules and all that stuff, but then you have this thing around communication and around government. That's an interesting word on planet Earth, government. What's the governing body of the community? And many different models have been tried. Democracy is one, and so on and so forth, and we've had dictators and so on and so forth. But I think probably the one that resonates with most people in community is consensus. It's just that when you have two, just even a couple, to find consensus in a couple it seems very, very difficult on this planet to have consensus. It's almost like compromise creeps in, like, okay, we'll do it your way tonight, but tomorrow night it's my way. The bargains begin immediately, even with two people, the bargains are there. And there's not that agreement, there's not that universal agreement. When you throw a group of people together, it takes an enormous amount of prayer and meditation and devotion, and I would say clearing. It's almost like you have to keep attuning and clearing to let all that darkness come by, let all the dark clouds pass. But there is the same presence. We all share the same presence. There's really only one of us, even though it appears there's 7 billion of us. 7 billion private minds with 7 billion private collections of private thoughts, different pasts, different future ambitions. It's quite a quagmire. 7 billion separate individual beings on the same planet. But when you go into deep connection, we actually, you could say that we are living by consensus now, that when we come together and decisions are made, more often than not, you will see nodding heads. That's a very fine way to be governed through, when you have nodding heads and you're all hearing the same thing. That's where the love really pours through. The laughter comes, bubbling joy. And it seems, people tell me it's extremely rare. People will visit and say, yeah, your community seems almost a little too good to be true. There's something that doesn't quite seem human, and it's not really. We would have to say there's such a deep dependency. Dependency is a bad word in this world, but we're so dependent on spirit, so totally dependent, that initially when I started off, Jesus would tell me things like he said in the Bible, freely you have received, now freely give. So basically for the last quarter of a century, I've been traveling around, shining, sharing joy, sharing happiness, sharing ideas, doing talks, and doing it on a donation basis. Because he said, freely you have received, now freely give. We're givers. We know that in order to live in this state of mind consistently, we have to be givers. We can't come together with a getting motive. We can't have a motive, what am I going to get out of this? We can't have plan Bs. Plan Bs they just eat away at the mind. If you've always got these things hovering, like, well, if this doesn't work out, there's always plan Bs. And we simply have led a life where we're so devoted to spirit that we actually give up plan Bs. And you're really fully present. You're really there when you don't have a plan B. here I am, I'm fully in, and let's go for it. So this has been our experience, and what I've noticed, just like Findhorn, I've noticed the collaborations here, the architecture, all the different things that have come over these 50-some years. I see those same elements in our community. I see that people come and they're inspired. There's art that comes forth. There's music that comes forth. There's all these collaborative projects. We have so many collaborative projects that are just designed to bless the whole and to extend the gift that we have been given. And I call it the fruits of the Spirit. The fruits of the Spirit just pour through very naturally. Kirsten was an example with the music. We've had an annual music and enlightenment festival, and the artists are just absolutely amazing. Amazing lyrics are given, channeled lyrics. I was looking at Eileen Katie's book on the way over, and the very talk that we gave in Coleraine, and the way we ended it was really I looked at Eileen Katie's message for today, October 20th. It was the same thing. I was like, this is what we just spoke almost.
The last line of our gathering was the first line of her message for the day.
Of her message for today.
October 20th.
Yeah. I could just feel the alignment, like, oh, those are the kind of synchronicities, the kind of things that happen, and you know that it's the Spirit, and you laugh along the way, because we have so many of those every day. Also, the way things grew here from a little caravan, and things have grown and grown and grown. Yeah, we started off, I just traveled around without even a tent. I wouldn't know where I was sleeping from night to night, because from starting around 1991 to 1996, I was living like Jesus and the apostles lived, day by day. The best way to describe my life from those years was something from the Bible. The birds of the air have their nest, and the foxes have their holes, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And I didn't have a place to lay my head, but it always showed up. I would watch the sun go down, and I would say, it'll be interesting to see how it goes tonight. And then again the next night, and then again the next night. So I learned trust. Before I got into communities, I was learning deep trust. And I think that trust just carried over into the communities, because when I did have communities, and we would have groups of people sitting around, and I would just be there in joyful presence, but occasionally, on some occasions, people would think that there was somebody that had a problem, or that somebody was a problem, like a problem person in the group, or a problem child. And I would just sit there in utter disbelief. You really believe that? You honestly believe that it's this person's fault? And then 4 or 5, 6 would say, yeah, we all agree. I'd say, you really believe that? To me, there aren't any personal problems. When we believe problems are personal, that somebody's to blame, that's the sure sign the ego is involved. It's a sure sign there's projection involved. And I'm not so interested in unified projections. Even when 4 or 5 people tell me there's a problem, I say, you really think so? I'll sit with them, but I'll just sit and sit and sit, because I am just aware that the problems aren't personal. It's the filter, it's the ego filter we look through and interprets and judges the world. That's the problem. And we have to focus on cleaning the filter, not correcting people. And Jesus even says that in the Course. He says, don't correct a brother, because he's the Christ. That's quite a teaching. Don't correct a brother. The correction of error section in the text. So that's really what our life has been dedicated to, and really that's the state. Kirsten just showed up tonight, and she's all wide-eyed and mystical with all of you. There have been some times when we've been traveling where I've had to just hold her hand like a 3-year-old, because she can hardly walk or read or anything. She just kind of gets into the gooey, mystical state where all is one, and it's nice that we have chairs here tonight. Yeah. It's just a blessing. It's a blessed life. It's very much of a blessed life. And so there's a lot of things swirling for us, like divine providence. We don't see it as the personal divine providence, as the universe taking care of bodies. It's really providence for the mind, providence for our consciousness, providence for our awareness. And then all the symbols just come in so easily, like the architecture and construction of Universal Hall over there. That's how our projects come in. When we have building projects, which over the years we don't always have building phases, but when we do, people show up. And they aren't generally builders either. It's amazing to see the Spirit channel through people who don't really have building skills. But you'll have just enough supervision or just enough expertise that's there, just the essence of enough to make it go. And then we marvel at it. We just marvel how things happen. And then when it's built, they're gone. They just show up and then they're gone. We really live on divine providence, and it's been amazing to watch, just like this has grown and grown and grown over these 50 years. We've got different properties and things that are unfolding, and it's all based on donations, and it's all based on shared properties. So we don't really have like a master plan. We're just living in the moment and trusting that whatever is given, whatever shows up, it's for the whole. And really it's that simple. We don't have any future aims. We aren't trying to change the world. We're not even trying to make the world a better place. We're just in the sense of being in presence and accepting the magnificence that is right here, right now, without trying to change absolutely anything of the world. We have a state of mind too that transcends politics. I notice there's like eco buildings and eco structures, and we certainly don't have any motive to go green, but that's actually what's happening. Two of our properties in Hawaii and down in Mexico are coming in with solar panels and all kinds of things that you might say fit with going green. It's just given. It's not like we have a motive behind it. It's just the Spirit's like saying, here, this is effective and simple and efficient. And we're all about saving time. We're not about reinventing the wheel. We live on donations, so we aren't about trying to squander anything. Neither are we feeling like there's a lack on the planet that we have to try to conserve for the sake of somebody else. It's just being in that presence and that flow of what's given. So it's kind of fun to watch how that's all unfolded too.
Yeah, and you've almost laid out. Can I take this off? Thank you. Yeah, and you've almost laid out the steps there. It's like giving up the plan B, which really having a plan B means I don't trust fully in plan A. So if I trust fully in plan A, I don't need a plan B. So plan B is a lack of trust. It's a backup plan. So a big part of coming into this trust, the development of trust in a deep way, is being letting go of the plan Bs, actually seeing what they are, the fallback plan, which is the past in some way. I could always go back to what I did before, or I could always rely on, someone, a family member, or some future retirement plan, or there's another plan that would back me up if something fell through. And as those have just been cleared away from the mind, what that is doing is actually saying, I'm committing to plan A. I'm making a solid commitment, like a 100% commitment in plan A. And plan A is God. Plan A is awakening. Plan A is saying, I want you to take care of me, actually. And when you make God the plan A, that means you want to be sourced by God. You realize that you are God's plan A. At the same time, you realize once you stop relying on the world and the plan Bs and the past as the safety nets, you say, I'm just going to give everything over to you, then you realize, oh my God, all that God wants is to provide for me. That's divine providence. And it's like the whole universe is truly here to support awakening when we give it that purpose. It's a flip from I'm a person in the world and I have to look after myself and make my life happen, to I give my life over and trust that everything is going to show me the way and provide for me. Jesus called it, put the kingdom of heaven first, Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all things shall be added. Well, it's true. It really does work. And it was scary giving up the plan Bs. Daring to just have one plan because, it just takes a lot of faith. And we have to be really shown how safe it is. But when those steps are taken and that trust is developed and that commitment is really strong, that's when the mind is no longer distracted. You can just be single-focused and single-pointed and actually available to hear and receive as much as the Spirit wants to provide. So I feel like that's a big part of community. It's about commitment. Relationships, it's about commitment. And really it's awakening. That's really what's underneath everything. When the community's purpose is awakening, or the relationship's purpose is awakening, or my life's purpose is awakening, there is this unified purpose that can be there beneath whatever it looks like, relationship or community, and that's really everything.
Yeah, I think most people are familiar with shared agreements. If anybody's been in relationship or community, you know that there has to be some shared agreements. Because again, you're coming from the darkness to the light. If you had perfect love, you could just have that be your shared agreement. I love you wouldn't that be the ultimate shared agreement? Let's just stick with one thing, I love you. In fact, I've actually performed some weddings. I was over in Canary Islands one time, and I knew I was supposed to go over there and perform a wedding, but I didn't know that the bride and groom were in attendance. I hadn't met them, so I was giving a talk, and I said, actually the best wedding vow, the only one I can really think of is I love you now. I just came right out with it. I said, that's got no flaws in it. You can't go wrong with that one. And people started laughing, but they could see I was very sincere about that. I love you now. Stay in the present and stay in the love right now. That's a promise you can keep. That's actually a promise that you can keep. We know how the other promises go with time, a lot of things can, what I said, well, actually, there's a lot of changes and shifts that come around those commitments, and the bride and groom, they were Spanish, but they, the next day when I said, well, do you have your wedding vows? When I met with them, they said, I love you now. It was in Spanish. They had adopted it from my talk the night before. They wouldn't change either. They were really going to stick with it. So for me, that's important in the sense that there's shared agreements, and those shared agreements are honored. Even when you make shared agreements, if you have a lot of great open communication, those shared agreements can be changed, as you feel guided. Nothing's set in stone with shared agreements. The love is for forever. And if trust goes, Jesus says in the Course, there's 10 characteristics of a teacher of God. If the first one goes, trust, your foundation's gone, then the others go down too. It's like a bowling alley. Hit the kingpin and the rest of them go down. And you need those things: honesty, patience, tolerance, generosity, open-mindedness. They're all based on trust. Without trust, you don't have anything. So for me, all of our communications have been really around deep trust, just hanging in there with that. And anything else is to be rinsed and to be washed. If we have a person or some people in the community that are in disagreement, you better believe we're going to hear from them. with no private thoughts and no people pleasing as the guidelines. We actually want to hear from them. We're not about people stuffing things down, denying things, pushing things out of awareness. We want to hear. If somebody's saying, I don't feel it, it's like, well, tell us more. What do you feel? You don't feel what the group is feeling, tell us what you do feel. And that takes us into a deeper prayer, because we genuinely love and trust everyone. So if something is out of accord, we don't think that there's multiple spirits and so there's going to be multiple answers. There's one spirit, and the spirit wants love, happiness, freedom for all of us. And so we're really joined. So that's very, very practical.
And with that commitment, like if being in community, if it's like a relationship of two, or living in spiritual community, if that's like a deep commitment, then there is no plan B. So, you have to share your private thoughts. You've got no choice. But if you've got this idea in mind of, oh well, I could leave, I'm only here temporarily, that motivation to really dare to be honest, to dare to take the risk, to open up, like open the heart, to share the thoughts, is right there. And so I just feel like commitment is really underneath trust. It's like Jesus says in the Course that every relationship is a total commitment. Whether the relationship is, like a brief encounter or a 1 year commitment, or it's a lifelong commitment, a lifelong time commitment. Every relationship is a total commitment, and so each time there's an opportunity to come together in this purpose, it's like you get to see, am I willing to take the risk? Am I committed to dare to go for this 100%, or am I going to hold back?
Of course, with a fairly large community or a well-known community, you're going to have influences and things that will kind of filter through. Even experimentations or ideas where everyone's like, what about that? Or would this work and this and that? The thing is, we've used A Course in Miracles, so it's basically a mind training program of releasing all judgments and all grievances and letting the darkness come totally up, so you don't have an unconscious and a conscious mind. You have a fully conscious mind. That's the goal for all of us, is to not have a subconscious that's running, the programming, the conditioning, the assumptions that are down there. As long as you have an unconscious mind, there's going to be all kinds of things that play out on the surface, because the body's almost like a robot or a puppet. It just acts out what the mind believes. And if you spot it, you got it. And if you believe it, you perceive it. And you may not even be aware of what you believe. You may not even know, but it'll get acted out in front of you, in your face. So that's how we find out about our unconscious mind, is what is going on the screen, on the surface. So in terms of sexuality and relationships, again, remember the guidance was, no vows. So we don't take vows of poverty or chastity and obedience. We don't take vows. We just have these no people pleasing, no private thoughts. So over the years, we have had some marriages in the community. Legal marriages. Also this idea that a marriage is like a temporary commitment. You're committing really to a higher purpose, to have your mind healed, to come to live in harmony with everyone and everything. So it's a very high goal, but if there's a guidance for people to get married or be in, we'll say, even a committed relationship, there's a sense that there's going to be a pretty intense mirroring that's going on. Mirroring goes on all the time anyway, but if you have a partner, you know how that is. It's kind of multiplied. It's just kind of in your face because you're living in such close proximity. So we've had those. We might say we rely on guidance for everything. So entering into those kind of relationships or coming out of those kind of relationships is a matter of guidance. It's really tuning in. And it doesn't presume that there's any things right or wrong or stigmas. We don't feel that there's anything better with coming together than there is breaking up. We have to trust that there's a bigger plan and that relationships are always maximal. Each one is learning the most that they can, and we have to be very honoring of those decisions. in terms of what you were mentioning too about multiple sexual partners and experimentations around sexuality, I've always felt from Jesus that the way he put it is that to accept the atonement, to wake up from the dream of this world of separation requires you accept the atonement. It's simply a word for correction. There's a correction that we have inside of us, and that's our purpose in life, is to find that correction and embrace that correction. Not the error. You know, it's like we're not responsible for the error, we're not responsible for the sin, we're responsible for accepting the correction for the error. And sin, in Aramaic, is missing the mark. So basically we're here to hit the mark, which is accept the correction. But that's what Jesus calls a total commitment. And he says that the ego doesn't even know what commitment means. So we're very wary of kind of living a life where there's no commitments and no agreements. We know that there has to be practical steps to take you back to this highest goal of accepting the atonement. So we're very honoring of these commitments, even if they're temporary. And I've always thought that kind of like multiple partners and multiple relationships, it's very ego gratifying. They're basically just for pleasure and novelty, and there's a motive underneath. I call it Dixie Cup relationships. Does anybody remember Dixie Cups? They were the little paper cups, like little funnels, and there's a whole bunch of them in the stack, and you just take one out and you just fill it up and you take a little sip and then you throw it away. And then you get another one out, you get a sip and you throw it away. That's how the ego likes to have relationships. Just keep getting the sips and throw the cup in the trash. Communication? No. Just keep getting the sips and throw it away. It's really a kind of an aimless life when you just go for gratification, ego gratification, and it's very short term and it's never satisfying. So we are quite honoring of these commitments, and also even when the commitments come to an end, we're very honoring about that too. But I wouldn't say, in terms of sexuality, for example, that we are into polyamor or some of the things they talk about, where I just see those as experimentations, but there's really not a deep commitment and not a deep communication oftentimes. They're very surfacey. When it's just for sexual gratification and you really aren't talking about the deeper things, it's not really the most helpful. We don't have anything where we say you can't, but in terms of our guidance, we just share what we really feel is helpful. Because we want to wake up, we want to come to a place of non-judgment, and we don't want to delay and waste time. So those are things that we've done, but I thought I would just touch on that briefly, because sometimes people say, well, what is your community and how do relationships work? Again, it's really based on guidance.
So, do you have an opinion after all these years of experience on the size of a community and the workability of what you're speaking of? Do you think this is quite a large community? I'm quite interested to know where you see there may be differences here compared to your communities.
Yeah, I think for me the trust and the honesty and the purpose of the community is so much out front. It's almost like a torch. Like if you were going into a cave, you'd want a bright torch in front so you didn't stumble, so you actually could reach your destination. I think for us the purpose is so clear-cut and so out front that the size so far has seemed to be pretty much fairly irrelevant because the purpose is out front. I know, for example, I've studied a lot of groups and looked into community living and everything, and some groups will come together more like co-ops, just more for financial reasons, to save money by pooling resources. Some come together with some religious reasons. There's been some pretty strange distortions in communities over the years, some pretty wild things that go on with communities. I would just say that's the ego just acting out. that happens with human beings as individuals or in couples or in groups, pretty much regardless of the size. I would say that if you looked at the societies of this world, even the cultures and societies, by most definitions they're pretty dysfunctional, with all the wars that we've had on the planets, and even when there's a seeming natural disaster, the pillaging, the breaking in and stealing things that happens in human nature. I think most of human nature, we'll say, is a projection of the ego, and that this whole world is really a projection of the ego. So maybe Kirsten has some comments, because I know as we went along, there were times when it was just me and my little peace house and a small group around me, where you were one of the strongest proponents of size, of keep it small. Can we not keep it small? And then it just seemed to grow organically, where we would grow and grow in houses, and then we would move to another place and there'd be more acreage and more, and there was more, then other centers starting in different parts of the world. But I remember with the original peace house, like you had your original caravan, when we had our original peace house, she was like one of the strongest proponents of, can we not keep this small? Because I think you were afraid of there might be a danger involved if it grew in size.
It was responsibility, mostly. I felt that if others... Well, for a start, it seemed so simple. It's simple when it's smaller. And it seems to take so much more time when there's more, because there's more thoughts to be exposed. There's more discussion time, and there's just a lot more healing going on, a lot more mirroring, and also this feeling of responsibility that I had. I was still washing this sense of self that really felt like I was responsible for others or for the healing.
She was in Greenpeace at 10 years old. So she had this responsible for the world, for the animals, for the people, very, very young.
Yeah. And so then I'd taken on the role of spiritual counselor or spiritual healer. And so anyone who was coming, I immediately thought, well, I would have to be the one working with them or supporting them. And what I was shown was it was actually the opposite. It was that everyone who came, who was meant to come and who was meant to stay, actually they ended up reflecting me, which is just a desire to serve and a heart of devotion. And so the more who came, the more support there was actually, and the more wind beneath the wings there was. And I found that even though if there were kind of healing sessions or talks, and they did seem to take more time, it actually was rich. And yeah, it became richer and deeper. The more who came, the more there was being offered. So that was just really being washed. I think the fear of numbers, that it would mean that I couldn't control it. I couldn't be responsible for it. And so I had to give it over to the Spirit. And every time we go onto a gathering somewhere, if I had that thought in my mind of, wanting to keep it small, David would say, and you're all welcome to come home with me. I have a peace house and you're all welcome. Just come, just show up. And I'd be sitting there saying, oh my God, why is he saying this?
Or even with materials, one time we were in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and before that trip, we would just burn CDs of talks and do little projects, resources. So we had these CDs. She burned, back in the day before there was multiple burners, and now it's all going digital, but burning CDs, she would burn CDs and label them, and so she made a stack of CDs. And at the end of the talk, I said, oh, by the way, we got some resources there. Help yourselves. Take advantage of these resources, and they're freely given. If you want to leave a donation, that's great. And, Jesus' Spirit, freely you have received, now freely give, with everything. Don't hold back and don't have reservations. So we did that, and she was just looking in horror as there was a Hispanic woman who just raced over to the table before Kirsten could get out of her chair to go to the table, and just in total glee just scooped the whole stack in one hand that she'd spent hours burning, and she was like, ooh, and probably said some words in Spanish and was just so happy to the Lord and zoomed out the door before Kirsten could get out of her chair, you know. Those are some classic moments we've had, you know. And freely you have received, now freely give, because it was undoing this sense of that, and also watching the money, watching the donation basket, because Kirsten occasionally would you know how squirrels bury their nuts. This is a community where where we have no ownership of anything, and she had stashed bank accounts, investments. She'd been like a squirrel of a human being, squirreling things away for a rainy day, and then
the queen of Plan B.
The queen of Plan B. Oh, she was going to make sure. You know, the squirrels, they bury them, then they forget where their nuts are. You know, they bury them, and they've been so concerned about not having enough food that they forget. And then well, that's what happened. She just forgot. She said, "Oh yes, I give it all for God. I give it all to Jesus." Wait a minute, where is that all? You know, it just would come out little by little.
Why am I seeing others withholding?
The squirrel says, "Why am I seeing others withholding?" So she had to go through some beautiful cleansing around that. But I think the heart of your question too is that what we found too is people will say, well, you know, with communities, you've got human nature. The ego likes to sometimes just be part of the community, to just not work, or just to kind of let their burden be lightened by being in a community where there's hard workers, and then some slack off. That's a size consideration too. If you've got 3 or 4 people and you've got one slacker, that's one thing. If you've got hundreds of people and you've got 30 or 40 people that are just along for the ride, but this and that, I think with our community, because our purpose is so far out front, that when we ask someone to do something, we kind of have this thing, I would never ask you to do something that I haven't done probably many, many times, or something like that, a year and a half or 2 years ago. She actually calculated like the scholarships, you know, like when in university, if you get a scholarship, you get your room and board and different things paid. She actually calculated that the percentage of scholarships in the community versus the ones that were donating was 75% of the community was on scholarship. 75% at one point, and we were just like, wow.
That's surprising.
Wow, Christ is very generous. I mean, it's kind of a phenomenal kind of number, because, you know, usually it still worked though. It was still working. It always just shuffles around, even when we have more people. It's kind of spread out now. We do have something going in Hawaii, Mexico, Utah, and also Cincinnati, Ohio. So it's not like we're all under the same roof or on the same land, but it's basically the principles are so strong that there's a real integrity that's part of the whole thing.
To me, the most revolutionary thing you've said to me personally tonight is no judgment. Now, the other day, I had a bus stop with a friend in the community, and it was all because when we were having a meal together, he just talked, and none of us could ever get a word in. So I said, can't you possibly stop talking so much? Now, the interesting thing is, you see, I was making a judgment of him. Now, the interesting thing is, he said back to me, which was very interesting, and I couldn't accept it. He said, well, look, don't you think you've got to change yourself? And I said, you're doing all the talking, why have I got to change myself? But what he was saying to me, if you are still, and if you listen to your inner voice, you will see really what the situation is. And I think what you've said is so fantastic. For example, as a community, whenever we have to make plans, we all get together and we have meetings. Whereas in the original days with Eileen Caddy, she used to sit on the lavatory every night getting guidance from her inner voice. So you possibly don't understand why she was sitting on the lavatory, but it was the only place where she could leave Peter in bed and go and find somewhere quiet in the caravan park.
Yeah.
But, so every day, she would spend, I don't know how long, but a long time, hearing and listening to her inner voice. And so it meant every day we were being directed by the inner voice. So I possibly didn't need to mention that, but the main point that I think is so fascinating is to stop judging and to listen to our inner voice. And my big question for you tonight is, could you please, sometime during the evening, give us a few ideas as to how we can refine the process of hearing our inner voice? Because I have to confess, I don't actually hear a voice. But I'll take a piece of paper and I'll write down what I think is coming to me. But I'd love to know, because Eileen heard an inner voice, and I would love to know what are your suggestions, because this seems to be the most important thing. If we're not going to make judgments, we then have to listen to this inner voice. Look, I've said far too much.
Thank you, that's beautiful. Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful too. And also there's another question, you can just come up and join in at the chair up here. Well, I used the Course in Miracles, and as I said, I put so many hours in there, but there was a part in the back of the book, in the Manual for Teachers, where I love it when they have Jesus questions. I'm always like fascinated with the questions, and then fascinated with the answers. And one of the questions that they gave to Jesus was, how is judgment relinquished? I mean, everybody knows in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, judge not. But that was 2,000 years ago. We've been trying to put those two words into practice. There's our principle right there. 1%
Absolutely.
Principle, 99% practice. Judge not. How do you do that? That's an amazing thing, to not judge. In the Course in Miracles, he gives us a full context of that. He says, well, you actually don't need to try to stop it. You have to start to come humbly into the realization that you never could do it in the first place. You weren't created to be a judge. Because when people say to me, how do you stop judgment, this voice in there that's criticizing and stereotyping and judging all the time, I say, how do you stop a runaway freight train that's going down a mountain? You don't. You don't. But you have to have a willingness to let what Jesus calls, let judgment through you rather than by you occur. So that's what I call guidance. You could call it intuition or many things, but I feel like that guidance is so important. And it doesn't have to come in words. It can come in feelings, or it can come in bumper stickers and billboards and signs, or a little child coming up to you and speaking it, or somebody with dementia suddenly starts talking to you and you know that it's the Spirit. It comes in so many ways. And I think the key thing for me was that I saw the importance of guidance, because I didn't want to forever be locked in with this Course in Miracles book. It's a heavy book. It's like a big book. It's not like a little Indian's Bible or something that you can stick in your pocket. This is like it originally was published as 3 books, 3 hardcover books. And I thought, I need to know what this whole course is about. I asked Jesus one time, like, what is this course really about? He said, it's the Serenity Prayer, from 12 steps, it's the Serenity Prayer.
So what is that, Serenity?
Serenity Prayer is, the things you can change, the things you can't change, and the willingness to know the difference. He said that's what the Course is. It's just a clarification of the Serenity Prayer. And so I said, okay, that's good, that's simple. But I also saw that it was just about connecting to that inner voice. I don't read A Course in Miracles. I really don't read books. I haven't read books for years. That's what inner guidance will do for you. It takes away everything. You don't need to read books. I don't read the Course. I haven't had a Course book with me for many years, because it's all about getting in contact with your own internal teacher, your internal guide.
Absolutely. And
then that guidance comes through in practical ways with our community in terms of everything that we've done, just like Katie, I sensed that she was like the spark at the beginning, and it was her prayer and her listening and her devotion that set everything in motion. And it's gone the same way for me. I would see that my life is just like hers. That was the sole dedication, And I never sought out to start communities or do anything, really. I had no plans
Yeah.
for anything in the world. So we'll probably talk more about that too. But we'll work that in just in terms of inner listening. It's been trust. Trust has been the main thing for me. I've had to really have deep trust to go on this path, because I had to let go of 10 years of university and all kinds of past learning, because that was just giving me an interference pattern to my inner listening. Everything in my education was all still designed to analyze and break apart, and this voice is all about synthesis. It's all about, harmony and coming with this time.
Yes, I have a question. It's about the relationship. I do blame myself that I broke up my relationship, and I don't see the difference where ego, my ego, my partner's ego played a role in that, or it just meant to be, or just organically dissolved, because we tried both, but I judge myself, I said, if I could, what I could done better, or what, what, because it seems to be so painful, I can't let it go and I cannot move forward at the same time.
Yeah, we were talking about that, how when I first read this part in the relationships part of the manual, where Jesus says, two people join together in a fairly intense teaching-learning situation and then appear to separate. And then he said, and each one learned the most that they could. And all relationships, the teaching, learning in all relationships is maximal. In other words, we're together and each one has learned the most they can learn. Mm. Now, the heartache, the pain comes in is you use the word if only, could I have done more, could I have done something different? It's like the heartbreak of all of our love stories, of all of our stories of unrequited love or breakups, it's part of the drama. And I did have a grandfather who lived into his 80s. He was of German descent, Heinrich Hermann Hoffmeister. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was very, very German name. And as I would be a little boy, I would watch my sporting events and do this, and I would always go, oh, the referee missed the call, and if my team hadn't missed this chance and this, I was always using the if word as a little child. I was always all stirred up and very emotional, and I was using the if word. And he would sit there and with a twinkle in his eyes and just a big smile on his face and just laugh and laugh and laugh. The angrier I got, the more he laughed. And then finally, I would just be looking at him, and he would raise one finger. He would wave one finger to me, and he'd go, if, largest word in the English language, as he would chuckle. And what I learned from working with A Course in Miracles is that this whole time-space cosmos and our relationships and everything about it is what I would call hypotheticals. We are so afraid of the present moment. We're so afraid of love, true, deep, loving intimacy, that we make up all these hypothetical scenarios and we torture our mind with hypotheticals. And it can be around university, it can be around education, it can be around relationships, it can be around children, it can be around parents. There's a lot of guilt. It's a very intense amount of guilt. And that's been our journey, is we've gone deeper and deeper into this journey of discovery, into starting to see that if something's meant to happen, there's nothing that can prevent it from happening. And if something's not meant to happen, there's nothing that can make it happen. Hypotheticals always try to throw in that option, if only things could be different. So to me, the whole journey to peace of mind is starting to realize that nothing can be any different than it is. I've had to let go of career, I've let go of my conceptions of relationship, I've let go of pursuits, I've let go of valuing things of the world. I would rather be happy, I would rather be peaceful than be tormented. And I found that, the Bible said let all things be exactly as they are. or the Course says that, it says all things work together for good for those that love the Lord. To me, that's, you're just right on the cusp of all of the torture that you're going through is this cry for love. Just a cry to find this peace of mind. It's a spiritual cry. And that's why you're at Findhorn, I would say. That's, the cry is so strong that's what it's all about right now. And it's there. That's what I'm just saying to you. It's really there. I did that too. I tortured myself over so many things, and then I came into a realization that I can't change the world. I mean, the Course even says the script is written, so people worry about predestination and everything. That's more of a linear kind of thing, but what it's saying is basically just accept all things as they are right now, and that is the answer. You will find peace and contentment.
Yeah, but aren't you going to then listen to the inner voice? You accept everything, but you listen to your inner voice.
Yeah. And that inner voice will be judgmental as long as you believe in judgment.
Yeah.
The Course says the Holy Spirit uses what the ego made. So as long as there's this thing called judgment, the Holy Spirit will use the judgment to take you out, to unwind your mind from the world. So it's so practical. And that's another thing, I will just tune it in. We still have to have judgments to go on a tour like this, 10-country tour, and then after we leave here in Europe, we go down to South Africa and go all over South Africa. Those things are guidances that came into us.
Would you say that as you listen to your inner voice, eventually you dump your ego mind and all your thoughts and ideas are coming from this source, the beloved?
Yeah.
That's it. You're just giving the whole formula to awakening right there. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And recognizing the ego voice, recognizing the if only voice, that is the recognition of that and the letting go of that leaves the space for the inner voice, capital I, to be heard. But I love that line in the Course about relationships. It says, like, if this relationship you appear to separate, that means the teaching learning within that context of being together is maximized. And somewhere in your heart, you know it. You knew it before it came to an end, almost too. But it doesn't mean that the healing stops, and it doesn't mean that the love stops. It's actually daring to stay with the love and not turn away, and still allowing whatever healing comes up into awareness to come up. But the ego grabs hold of that and says, oh, but what if? And it just takes the healing in the moment and actually takes the mind away from the healing and the release and the forgiveness and distracts it back into a defense again of not accepting what is.
And the collaboration, it's good that you're asking this because we're on this tour and there's, how many of us? 4 or 5 of us.
Plus Andy 6.
Yeah.
Well, others are in support.
Yeah, there's a group of us going here through Europe, and out of the whole group of us, Kirsten and her ex-husband are on the tour together. Actually, he's on his way to tomorrow.
Dublin and then Finland.
To Finland tomorrow, and you're on your way to Sweden tomorrow. But you were just with him. And so you see how this gives a whole new twist to relationships, because when you're serving in purpose, you are no longer married, but you are joined in connection and purpose very strongly. You probably would say stronger now than when you were married even. So how different that is. So she's speaking from the experience, because I do know what you're bringing up. I remember when you would talk to me a lot about that, where you were tortured.
Yeah.
She was tortured around the relationship. Should it end? And then when it did end, there was still a few niggling little doubt thoughts. Could it not have ended? And you see that's the temptation of the world, to wish that things could be different than they are, or even hope that they could be different. It's very, very tantalizing. And so once you came through that, then the love was stronger than ever.
Stronger than ever. And But yeah, I think especially when relationships have such a deep purpose, you know, and you open up even deeper together, and it's part of a pathway to God. And so part of the mind is saying, how could this come to an end? And we still love each other. It doesn't make sense why it should come to an end. But again, it's just when it's maximized. And just somewhere deep inside, you just have to come into that trust or that acceptance of it. And that, like a true relationship, that was the prayer of my heart before launching on the spiritual journey. It's like, I want to know a love that can't come to an end. And so this is it. Like, this is what we're actually experiencing with these relationships, is that the love is what's true, the love is what brought us together, and the love is just deepening and staying in awareness, and then everything else that comes up for healing, and the voice that would have us turn away or say something's actually ended. Like, those are just the thoughts being healed.
Yes. You want to come to the microphone? Or?
Interesting what you're saying about Plan B.
Can you come up?
Yeah.
This is being recorded, so this could help somebody on the other side of the world that you have no awareness of. They might write to me and go, oh my God, that question is an amazing question.
Just in terms of you saying about Plan B and the discussion that just happened there, for me, I think it's interesting when we try and define anything, give something a name, which is sort of like having a plan, and particularly in the situation with relationships, that if we don't choose to name it, it can actually just be what it is. And so nothing can end, because we're not saying this is this and this is what it looks like. And I find the more that I can do that, the more I'm just present with what is, and the pain of thinking that something's end, nothing can actually end. It just maybe changes, but...
Yeah, you're onto it. If you can come to that beautiful space of not defining and just staying with what's given, the guidance, the given in the moment, that's everything. And in fact, I ended up starting the first Course in Miracles monastery on the planet, and one time a few years ago I was giving a talk at this Course in Miracles monastery, and what came through from the Spirit was, okay, here's what I want you to be aware of for your relationships now. So the whole community was listening, as I was as well, as it came through. And it was undefined, guided collaborations. It was starting to think of relationships as undefined, guided collaborations. And I thought, that's my life. I've been collaborating with all these people, hundreds of people, thousands of people for a quarter of a century, feeling the total commitment with all of them, coming together, rejoicing with them, and then our collaborations with the constellations would come together, just like when you have a band. Look at the Beatles, wasn't that great? The Fab Four, didn't we all enjoy that? Can't we appreciate that? And then when they go, there were always those that got to get the Beatles back together. Almost, then they had turned it into a political issue. It's like, leave the guys alone, come on. John's gone off with Yoko, let him go, and George with Linda, let it be. Listen to the songs, apply the songs, don't keep judging these guys. Why do we have to have four together? Can't we just enjoy that, say that was a great collaboration? I mean, when George passed away, they did all, the ones that were left came together, and wow, they gave it quite a show, but that was just another collaboration in the moment. And so, I'm not into dissecting and defining relationships. One time I was invited to Argentina, and my friend, her husband of 32 years had said he wanted to split up, and he had another lover, and all this and this, and she said, don't even come down, the family's just a mess, and there's so much anger and everything. David, you don't even want to come. I said, I've already bought my ticket. I'm coming. So I come down there, and when I got to the airport, her and this man who had been her husband for all these years, they both greeted me at the airport. And I gave them both big hugs. And I went with the family, and the family was so angry at this man. And I was like, can we not honor decisions? If someone chooses to leave an arrangement and go, can we honor that? Is there some kind of law written that we have to blame people when they decide to move on? So there was so much healing that went on there because I couldn't see a problem. I was like in this angry hornet's nest, and I'm just like, what's the problem? I'm trying to hug everybody, and there's no need for that. And they would all let up all their emotions with me, but I was just saying, no, we don't really have a problem going on. We have to honor these decisions. Everyone's doing the best that they can based on what they believe in. Once we start to figure that out, then we take away the blame. They're just acting out their unconscious beliefs. So why should we be the judge, the great God that tells them that they're wrong? You know, can't we celebrate with them? You're leaving, okay. Instead of mourning, we should say, okay, can I help you? Can I help you pack? Is there anything I can do? You know, that's the attitude we should have when somebody says they want to leave. They say, I want to divorce you. Okay, how can I assist in the matter? You know, imagine how much fun you would have if you were just in assistance mode, you know, just showing up in assistance. And instead of like, oh, we've got to see a counselor. You know, we have to see a counselor to help us fix. No, it's not broken. It's just we have to honor the decisions. Yeah. So it's beautiful. I love that. It's to the extent that you cannot define relationships, you really have a lot of fun. They're just fun collaborations, you know. Like when we were kids, you know, we just played. It wasn't a big deal, you know. Who's with who? We weren't asking who's with who at 3, 4 years old. Maybe some of us programmed, but most of us were not because we weren't defining.
Yeah,
It was a playmate.
it's very gracious, it's very graceful. You know, it's like when our goal is awakening, that's the purpose. And then if a relationship comes and it's brought to you in support of that purpose, it's like, oh, there's such a gratitude to the spirit for bringing it, you know, for the one who's been brought. There's a devotion and an integrity with that. And then when it's maximized or it's time that it's to go, there's just still can be. Of course, the healing is there if there's still sadness or attachment or other emotions or beliefs being flushed up for healing. But yeah, that same attitude of gratitude really can be there through the whole thing. And it's only if we really believe that we own it, that we made it happen and we own it and we've defined it, you know, in some way, then there's just more of a grip on it, and it just seems like more healing or more resistance is there around it. But yeah, that's the experience now. It's just very given in the moment.